Andre DeQuisto. I'm the founder of Lone Wolf Portable Tree Stands, Lone Wolf Custom Gear.
All right, well, we got Dan on the line.
And I started thinking, I probably shouldn't have shared those pictures.
All right, guys, we got Don Higgins on.
Anything that's got to do with chasing big deer, I've got my hands in it somehow. So.
Well, my name's John Eberhardt. The first one that comes to mind was early in my career.
I'm Scott Buckley from Iowa. I had jumped him in the summer too. He jumped up in that swamp grass down in the bottom lake.
And yeah, that's what I'm doing. I'm chasing it. There ain't nothing stopping me.
Justin Hollinsworth. I'm with Whitetail Addictions and Lone Wolf Custom Gear.
So what are we talking about tonight?
We're talking about the one that got away.
They talked about a deer that you didn't get it done on for some reason. So go ahead and get into the story of the one that got away. Welcome to the Whitetail Legacy Podcast, coming in your ear holes, and I'm a voice short tonight. Old Home Slice isn't feeling too good. He's finally going to miss a podcast. I've missed 2 in 4.5 years, and I don't think he's ever missed one. So this will be his first one he's ever missed. But I got a good replacement. I got Grant Putnam from Last Breath, and we're going to talk a little late season food and the value of it, and a bunch of different stuff. About how you should kind of get prepared for next year if you don't have any food right now. How you doing tonight, man?
Tip top, ready to roll and talk about this with you.
Heck yeah, I mean, I appreciate you coming on. Kind of short notice. I wanted to talk to someone, and you've been hunting your balls off late season. You guys prepare for late season, so couldn't really think of a better person to talk to. We're going to get into the people that make this possible. We're going to get off of the show. I want to start with Last Breath. I want you guys just to touch base on the film festival, Badlands Film Festival, a little bit. The video should be coming out soon, and what the listeners can expect and what they're seeing.
Sure. So this year when we went down there, we were selected for the short film category. We did not put in a full feature film this year, and there were 3 others, us being the 4th film that was in the short category. Those are film submissions that are under 4 minutes in length. And then there were another 8 films that were in the full feature category, and those have a maximum length of 10 minutes capped. So there's 12 films total. The host, Blake Van Tussenbrook, one of the marketing managers at Badlands Gear, he actually, he typically calls the short film category the appetizer, and the full course meal is the full feature films there. So there were 8 filmmakers in the full, 4 in the short. There was only one filmmaker that crossed over both categories, and that submitted in both. And that's a guy by the name of Matt Forsyth. And he does a lot of work for KUIU, and a guy by the name of Will Waldrop, which is the gentleman that he submitted the 2 other films in. So there's 12 total films. We ended up getting 4th in the short category. I'll be interested to see, what everybody else thinks. There's a definite and stark difference between our film and the other short films that were entered in that category. And then the 8 films that were the full length, they were really a diverse group. There was an elk hunt this year. There was just kind of a film about respect and values of hunting. There were several films about youth, several films about, big, interesting destination hunting trips, muskox / caribou hunt. And then there was a 2 moose hunts in there this year, which I've never seen 2 moose hunts. I've seen 1 in there before, but it's just a lot of different kinds of films that kind of share a couple threads and common themes. So I'll be interested to see what the viewers, when they view the full show, they'll probably be able to pick up on our film and how it was a little bit different in the short film category from the others. So pretty honored to be there. It was our 3rd submission in 4 years. We didn't submit in 2020, 21, but in 19, 20, and 22, we submitted and got in. So 3 for 3, just haven't made the podium yet with the trophy or any of the cash. So still trying to get in that those top spots.
Yeah, it's pretty cool film fest. Seemed like was there less people there this year, or was it about the same, did it seem?
So I talked to a lot of people before, like at the producer pre-party thing. So my wife and I drove down there. It's about 5 hours, 45 minutes from our house to Louisville. And we drove down there, talked to several people that I knew that submitted a film. The guys from Chase Nation and Sam Ubel submitted a film, so I was talking to them a lot, and they actually bought passes to the ATA show this year. We didn't want to. We've been there for about 7 years, and we kind of viewed it as, we've already kind of been there, done that. And we didn't want to waste our time going again. And he said that it was absolute a ghost town there, and people weren't there this year. And the turnout of the film festival kind of reflected that. There's probably a 1,200 to 1,500 people there, but in years past where there's been 3,000 or 4,000 people and the doors are packed and looping around the theater there, it's the attendance for everything seemed to be down this year, and I don't know why that is. I have some theories, but kind of interesting.
Yeah. All right, well, let's get into the rest of this. We're hit right on optics. I talked to Austin today. They got some new stuff coming down the line. I'm pretty excited to get my hands on that. And I also want to say that these guys aren't only like a shotgun muzzleloader rifle sights. They have pistol sights and a lot of tactical stuff too. So definitely check them out. They got that lifetime warranty, and guaranteed have your stuff back in 72 business hours. If it does break or needs repair, they just send you a brand new one. Next Level Deer Supplements. This is the time of the year that they need the feed the most. The does are bred. The bucks are at their worst from now. The next month, they're at their smallest they're going to be, trying to regroup. So if you can feed in your state, I wish we could feed. I say that all the time. I don't care if we could bait, but I wish we could supplemental feed and mineral throughout the year. It's something that we can't do in Illinois. But this is the time to do it, and Next Level can get you hooked up there. Exodus trail cams. The battery life in these have been kicking butt out there when it's been cold. Some of our other cameras have their batteries get low and then their flash gets pretty bad. I've been noticing, and the Exodus trail cameras, they're pretty consistent. And I've been running 2 that I know of on video mode for I don't know how long, and we can't bait, but at least 2 or 3 months with industrial lithiums, and those things are just absolutely ripping. So definitely check them out, and I'm sure that they have some beginning of the year deals coming up soon. The last breath code for Badlands, is that still in effect?
It just expired the other day, so I'm going to work on getting a new code. Okay. But that should be within the next 2 weeks, so we can supply that code again. All right. Yeah, we got a lot of messages about that. It's nice to be able to give our listeners a little discount whenever they can. And this isn't we've ran some ads for them before, but Under Warmer, I just want to mention that you've been wearing it a lot. I've been wearing it, and we wore it before and talked about it. And then I wore it when we went out hunting here recently, and I was just blown away by what it is. And it's basically a fitted shirt with 8 hand warmer, 4 in the front, 4 in the back. And I was thinking, I don't think you would want to wear that as a base layer. You would want something in between your skin and it. It says 100 degrees, but man, it got super warm. Pretty reasonable price. You've been using it. How is the renewable, if you bag it and put it back on, how's that work? So I've done that twice. And basically if you cut off the air supply to it, so if you have like a 1 gallon Ziploc bag, you can throw it right back in there and it immediately heats up. Goes right back. Yeah. I put mine in the Ziploc bag right when I got home, and I'm gonna hopefully use it again this weekend. But that's something I hadn't done before, is used it twice. But I know that they say you can reseal it. It's good for 12 hours. It's just a really cool hunting product that kind of ties into late season food that I don't think is very well known and not talked about by anybody, but it's like a super awesome product. It's definitely changes how your comfort level of setting out there. And that's the name of the game right now, is being able to set in these cold temps. But we're ready to get in this. And like I said, we're going to talk about late season food, food plots. We're also going to touch bait a little bit, but that's something that we can't do here in Illinois. But food plots in general, we talk about, on a budget, if you can go all out, what kind of value they bring, and then kind of how to hunt it
and how to prepare for next year. Because now is the time to make a plan on what you want to do. So you've been hunting the last like 14 days, right? Or 12 days or something like that?
Yeah. So the last 2 weeks, well, I'm a school teacher by trade, so we get our winter break. And then I also had COVID last week, which forced me to quarantine for 10 days. So I got the luxury of being able to teach from home and go out in the evenings last week. And so, yeah, out of about 14, 15 days, I've been out about 10 or 11 times and
nice.
Seen a lot of deer.
Yeah. So you're the perfect to talk on this subject. I think we should start this off with how to, if someone's thinking about getting food plots going, the season maybe have a couple of weeks left, but they need something for next year. What would be your go-to plan to create a food plot where you could potentially have an opportunity? Because, listen to your guys' podcast, you're right. You either have the food and have the deer this time of year, or you have no food and no deer. There's no in between. It's either all or nothing. So if a guy wanted to make a plan now, what's some things that he should be thinking about doing?
So Garrett and I kind of have like a schedule that we go through every year. And I see you have about 3 options if you're normal, everyday, average Joe guy with, middle class, working class salary, kind of like all the people that we talk to on our podcast and all of us in general. None of us are making, ridiculous amounts of money or owning our own equipment. So I'm speaking of those, about 90% of the listening base here is going to be in the same boat we're in. So a couple of different things. Option 1, the best option for a monoculture crop, I would say that'd be your corn and beans, would be if you've got agricultural ground on your land that's currently being cash rented by a farmer. Garrett and I have done it simply before where we're like, all right, what are you getting per acreage? What kind of harvests are you bringing in? What kind of bushel per acre on corn and beans are you yielding? We're just going to pay for it. And you can leave it stand up. And so we've had that happen. Our best year of hunting actually on record was a deer that he and I both bucked out. And this would have been 9 years ago when we started hunting our best farm for the first time, and standing soybeans got left in a back secluded field that we hunt. And we ended up killing 4 really nice deer that year, all around the field area itself. 1 in October, 1 in November, and then 2 later into the late season. So one of those deer is actually kind of hanging right up back there on the wall. So option 1, the most eco-friendly way, I would say, and cost-efficient way of getting corn and beans for the late season specifically would be working with your farmer and just finding a farmer that maybe is adjacent to you or is going to allow you to hunt that is okay with taking that loss and being able to just recoup the cash funds off of what he was going to make from the elevators anyway. So that's
a great option. Yeah, that's a great option. A lot of the farmers around here, the ground right up next to the timber isn't a really high yielding ground most of the time anyways. And It's kind of a pain in the ass for them to harvest those end rows that are close to timber or something. And that's kind of where you want this food to be anyways. So I think that's a great option. A lot people are going to be more apt to do that than I think. Like if you went to a guy and said, hey, I'm going to give you the exact price, it saves them time harvesting. They're still making the money and they don't have to worry about the ground that is subpar closer to the timber. And if it's something that, like a lot of the farmers around here, they're always cutting the trees back and everything to get the combine in there. If they didn't have to get the combine in every year, it's really going to benefit them to lease that out. So that's definitely a good option.
Yeah. And Garrett and I have done that before where we'll just simply take T-posts or, homemade like wooden stakes we'll spray the tips of them with like blaze orange or fluorescent orange or yellow or pink or something. So that way when the combine's coming through that the picker will know like, oh, that's the area I'm supposed to leave. And so we've mapped out like acres of 2 to 4 acres before for late season, food sources being left by the farmer. That's option 1. The second option is the slightly more elaborate option for late season food. We're talking if we're specifically honed in on that. Lots of deer that I've seen over the last several days, and that I continue to watch online when I'm watching productions online, and experts that I look up to. Lots of deer in our cameras too. It seems like every night we've got about 40 deer on our property, and the herd is split. And typically they'll come out and they'll feed in an area where we have about 2 acres worth of turnips planted. So I just wanted to go over some of the numbers for turnips. So if a guy wanted to, and he had access, and I wrote that down as well. So for about $800, $900, you could have an absolutely outstanding turnips plot. So you're going to want that in moderate to direct sunlight. So we just converted a part of an old field to that, and a little bit of math for you here. Whitetail Institute is the seed blend that we use, as well as you guys. And for 24 pounds of tall tine tubers, which are the turnips blend that Garrett and I plant, 24 pounds will do 4 acres, which is an absolute ton of turnips. And that is only $160 for that sack on whitetailinstitute.com. So you're in for $160 there. And that is also a rest. What's the word I'm looking for here? Resistant. So you can actually spray this with a rest. It's a grass killer that will take any of the tall weeds that are going to be coming up through there when you plant it. So we'll till it, which tractor tiller, you can rent that from most of your local small rentals, like, anywhere between a 24 horse and like a 40 horse tractor. They'll give you the tractor tiller and trailer rental for $600 for like 24 hours, or like $480 for a half day, 12 to 8 hour day. So there you're in for, let's call it an extra $600 if you go with the 24 hours. So now you're up to about $750. And then the way that you can get it to grow even better and really throw a lot of tonnage on the ground is Garrett and I, for the last 5 years, we've been renting a buggy from our local co-op, agricultural co-op, and we'll ask for 2,000 pounds of an even mix of fertilizer, and we'll go out and fertilize the turnips that we have. And depending on how much fertilizer you want, we've done 1,000 pounds in the past. This year and the last year, we actually did 2,000 pounds, and that's $250. So for $1,000 total, if you can get all the tilling done in a day and you do it smart before rain comes, for $1,000, you can have 4 acres of planted turnips that are going to be about the size of softballs or larger. That's going to provide a ton of food for deer. And we've been seeing deer hit those first before they even hit our late season beans for the last 2 to 4 weeks in Illinois. They've been hitting that first. So that'd be option 2, would be to go something like that. And then option 3, if you have access to the equipment yourself and can do all the work without the rentals and stuff like that, that's obviously going to cost you the cost of a tractor and equipment, which is no small feat. That's why we do it the first way I presented and the second way that I presented. But you figure, if you're got, I don't know, corn that's bringing like 100 to 150 bushel acre corn, not really nice black dirt primo corn prices like in Illinois and Iowa. Most of the fields that we're renting from a farmer, they're back in a cove, which is where deer want to be anyway, and they're shittier yields. So typically a farmer's going to let you go for a little bit less in those areas than other areas. And so I feel like the third option is doing it all yourself and having the equipment and stuff like that. We don't, which is why we buy the cash crop off of the farmer, and then we kind of shabble together, get a couple buddies that either have a tractor or we go rent one ourselves, get the buggy, and then do the tilling, in the wake of a really good rainstorm that we know is going to hit us. So actually this year when we were planting that particular food source with the turnips, we actually tilled that up and we waited for 3 weeks. That ground was tilled and we waited for 3 weeks until we had a really big rainstorm coming in. And on the evening before that rolled in, Garrett went out there and seeded it, and that beat it down into the ground and the fertilizer as well. And it's clutch. There's about 20 to 30 deer on it that feed through it on their way to the beans every single night.
Yeah, I think the farmer option, people think that it's going to be expensive, but when you think about if you're wanting to do like an acre, I mean, that's probably one of the most efficient ways to do it. To pay the farmer. But we do kind of the same thing. We find someone that has a tractor and a tiller, and we pay them to come out and then we buy the seed and we put the seed out. And another good option is the throw and grow, and that's what we did in one spot this year. That's kind of a very cheap way to do it. If someone's like, man, I want to try this, I don't know how it's going to go, I'm going to give it a shot. I'm going to do something small and see how the deer react. Maybe I'm going to do a 1/4 acre and 1/2 acre. And then instead of going into it and spending $1,000, I'm going to try to see if any deer actually come to it. And then the next year, you're obviously, that plot's going to get ate up pretty quick and you're going to want more tonnage. But that's what we did this year. We did a small plot. We went in there, we killed everything, went in there and we burned it and raked it, and got the soil open. There was a bunch of rain coming. We were absolutely blessed with rain earlier this year. It was bad on the hand fishing, but good for the food plots. But we seeded it right before rain, and it grew one of the best food plots we've ever had. And it was just a throw and grow from Whitetail Institute. And those deer, they hit it early, really, really good, and then they didn't hit it until late. But that's why when you're planning a late season food source, there's other options, but I feel like it's beneficial to have something that they're not going to hit until late. If you have something that they're going to hit all year, that food is probably going to be pretty scarce and gone by the time they're actually going to want a daylight on that due to cold temps. So I think there is a positive to having a food plot that's more specifically for late season. We also planted beans, and they do go to our beans, but way less than the greens, and they do it at a later time. And I think a lot of that has to do with the location that we have to plant the beans. With the kind of the throw and grow and those turnip plots, you can kind of put those in a more secluded spot as long as you have the sun kind of in a low spot or something. And they're going to hit those before they go to the field at dark. And I think that's super valuable. It's something that I've done in the past and not had a ton of success with. And then I did it this year, and it was, once the cold weather got here, it was like a light switch of no deer on the property to a bunch of deer on the property in daylight, and having an opportunity at a buck that we kind of hunted all year. And there's no way that deer would have even been there if they didn't have the food there. But I'm going to talk to the farmer. The farmer did raise pigs, and he used all his corn for pig feed.
Yep.
And they lost all their pigs, and they don't know if they're going to get back into the pig game. But if I could have some standing corn or some standing beans there, that would be super beneficial. But that wasn't an option, but it might be an option now. He did corn on corn on corn every year and then fed the corn to the pigs. And now that might be an option where he's like, yeah, I'll leave you an acre or a 1/2 acre, kind of in a low spot or out of the way. So that's definitely something that I want to talk about. But you can go as big or small as you want. You can have a big giant plot, or you can have a small petite plot. With the spray and the seed and with the labor we had, we might have had $200 in that food plot, that throw and grow. And like I said, there's a lot of deer on it early and late, and that's a good option. But definitely, if we had a giant 2-acre plot there, the deer are still going to be there. And when you do a 2-acre plot, you can kind of have some variety. Say, okay, this is going to be my early season, mid-season food, and then this is going to be my late season food. And then kind of hang your stands according to the wind direction for early and late, where they're going to be on the food plot.
Yeah, I was actually thinking about, the option A, like if you're going to buy something. So in the background, as you've been talking here, I was dinking around and looking up some average bushels. And in 2020, the average bushel in Illinois harvested was 190 bushels per acre of corn. That's just what the market said online here. And then right now, people are getting about $6.06 per bushel. So we round that down to 6 and multiply 190 by 6. You're paying about $1,100 per acre of standing corn that you want left up. So if you just, for simplicity of math, leave 2 acres of standing corn and you mow it, cut it down, knock it down, whatever, then you're in it for about $2,200. And I guess the way that Garrett and I talk about anything financially related to whitetails is how much would it cost a person to go to Kentucky, to go to Iowa, to go to an outfitter during the rut for 3 to 5 days? Well, most people worth their salt are going to be between $3,500 and $6,500 for a hunt like that on a trophy caliber whitetail. And I guess the question I'd ask to the listeners is, what amount of money would you pay to go hunt a whitetail or to have that insurance policy? That's kind of the way that I see it. It's like deer hunting is kind of like gambling, and food plot is hedging your bet. It's kind of like having insurance on your house or your vehicle. You know, you're not planning on that happening. Like ideally we're bucked out by November 5th every year, all of us, but we know that that's not the reality. Most cases we're going to be hunting late into the season, like, you know, we're trying to now. So that'd get you quite a bit of corn. And if it's yielding out at 190 bushels an acre, you know, one bushel's 40, 50 pounds. And that's a lot. That's a lot of sacks worth of 50-pound corn to be, you know, out on the ground there. That's going to last for a very long time.
Yes. One thing that I wanted to cover that I think a lot of people are probably thinking, a lot of people listen to this from different state than Illinois, and they can bait. So I want to go in kind of like a pros and cons of what you think about baiting and food plots. And I might throw some little bit of stuff in there. But a lot of people think, oh, I'll just bait, draw the deer in, and it'd be way more cost effective than planning the food plot. What's your take on that? What's some pros that you could see and cons that you could see to that situation?
Well, I could see that if they bait and they get it done really quickly, no doubt in my mind that it would be cheaper than planting a food plot. However, I'm not like a person that's in a state that can bait, like you said. I don't have any experience doing that. So people that are, you know, a person like Cam Deerfield, who's applying a lot of bait to a lot of stations, like a person like that in the outfitter realm in a baiting state, I feel like they'd be really qualified to speak on this. Whereas I'm just qualified on the food plot side and not the bait side. But I feel like the psychopaths or really passionate people in any industry or anything that's being done are going to go that nth step. For example, if baiting was legal here in Illinois, I know that, maybe that'll take place of maybe a micro plot or something that Garrett and I are considering planning, but we're going to be out there and we're going to be baiting it and consistently updating that every day. We're not going to let it be running dry, and we're going to get on a schedule and keep the bait supplied to the deer if that's the thing that we would be able to do. But the first glaring downside to it would be, I feel like you'd be, you know, pressuring deer more often than not if you're unless you have a setup that was like a buggy system or some kind of auger cart that you could drag behind a truck or a tractor or something like that, and really supply the bait in large quantities where it would permit you to stay out of there for longer periods of time. But that's the first and obvious reason, I think. And then like I said, for cost, if you're a person that's going to run bait for 6 months of the year, like lots of those southern states that allow it, their deer seasons are extremely liberal and they're last forever, it seems like. And I would say that if you're a person that's really doing your due diligence and having that bait always there, you're probably going to run through a lot of money. I should make a spreadsheet and just kind of model this out after we get done here, and then give you some numbers to talk about the next podcast.
That's kind of what I was thinking too. We can't bait, but I feel like you would be in there replenishing that bait. I'm not an expert on it at all either, but that was just my opinion. If you have a food plot, the thing's out there, it's there all year. You don't have to do anything to it once you get it in the ground. It's regenerating food. You know, it's not throughout the year, it's growing more food and more food. It's just basically supplying bait itself. And I feel like a green turnip field has just as much draw power as a bait site would to bring a deer out in daylight, because you have no human scent, no pressure, no nothing. You can monitor that food pot and strike, where with the bait, you're going to have to go out there, apply bait, and then reapply bait. And then if you get any snow or ice, like we got here, we've had snow and ice on the ground for, 2 weeks. I feel like if you had any bait out that would be frozen underneath the ground, you'd have to reapply on top. But like I said, if that's something that Illinois ever did do, I definitely would be in the game on 100%. Doing it. And then we would know a little bit more about it. But I know that there's a lot of listeners that are probably on the fence about like, well, is a food plot valuable because I can bait, and if my neighbor's baiting, I got to bait. But I still think that having that food that replenishes itself, it's good. And I don't know about you, but there's a lot of hunters that hunt around us, but there's not a lot of people that put late season food out or food plots in general. I feel like that's talked about a lot and seen a lot on TV and YouTube and stuff. But I feel like probably if you took a poll of the amount of hunters that put a food plot out, it's maybe 20%. You know, I wouldn't think it would be very high. So if you are not in a state that can bait and you're trying to compete with your neighbors, or even if you are in a state that can bait and you have a food plot and they don't, that's a huge draw power. Because these deer are coming, the deer that we have now have been gone for months and now are coming back. You know, they knew this food plot was there. They're on it early, and now the snow's here and they're coming back and hitting it pretty regularly. So it's definitely interesting to see what they can do.
I feel like a couple other benefits and drawbacks that I was thinking of there that you kind of sparked my train of thought down the tracks on are a bait site is a singular location. It's like one little blip in time, one little location typically, unless you have multiple bait sites, which gets into my point that trail cameras and monitoring that bait site would be much easier than monitoring a large late season food plot. So right now we've got about 4 acres of what we call a buffet, and that's clovers, brassicas, and turnips/radish. And then we've got a 4-acre bean plot. And it does take quite a few cameras to cover all of that and make sure that we're clogging up all the entrances and exits with cameras to monitor every single deer, the majority of the deer that are coming into the plot. Whereas a bait site would just be, you know, you could set one camera with a moderately slower trigger speed on there, one mobile camera, and you'd know every deer that would be hitting it. Another one is I feel like when I watch things online, and about 12 years ago, Garrett and I went and did a hog hunt down in Texas, and, you know, it's baited. We're sitting over a big ass pile of corn. And I feel like when I watch a lot of that content and hear from people in states that can bait, everybody's just like, oh, going willy nilly. Like, oh, you live in a bait state. It must be so easy to hunt. Where I feel like if you are coming in on serious pins and needles to those bait sites, they know something is kind of not natural. They know something's kind of up. Whereas a couple acre field or a micro kill plot that's kind of out in the middle of the woods with not really one lump or mound of something that's moderately unnatural for a deer. I feel like it's a little bit more natural to plant a food plot just because it's kind of mirroring a smaller version of like a monocrop field, which deer are used to. And so I feel like there are a couple of other, you know, benefits of bait. You can monitor it with trail camera easier, but I feel like in a state you can bait that deer coming in a little bit more wigged out, a little bit more on edge, and like that, they're more probably apt to drop, to blow, to run, stuff like that. So a couple other things.
So I mean, our season, we have 5 days left or so here. I know a lot of other seasons are out, but if someone was to hunt this, how do you go about hunting it? I feel like the hardest problem for us with a late season food plot is the access to it. I feel like that's something that you need to plan out kind of well in advance, because something that we didn't really plan on having a problem with is deer bedding very close to the food plot. And that's what we got now, like spots that deer have never bed in before that are fairly open. They're bedding in now because this food plot is there. So I feel like that's something that you need to kind of make a plan for now. So how would you think you could go about doing that?
So Garrett and I are about 5 years into doing this and practicing this, but lots of those food plot seed makers, they'll make screening. So visual screening is something that we tried to plant, and we've been doing it for about 5 years now, and some more successful than others, some, you know, less. This year's screen, we planted a particular blend, and it was awesome. Just so awesome. All September, all October, all November. And then when it started to wilt and dry out and get hard, some of these, I don't know if you remember the wind that we got on December 6th. It was like an 80 mile an hour wind, which kind of sucks in retrospect. Like if you're a food plot seed maker you're probably not making Egyptian, grass blends that are going to be rated for 80-mile-an-hour winds. That's like a siding or a shingle maker. Like, yeah, we can stand up to an 80-mile-an-hour wind, and then a tornado rolls through at 200 or something and sucks all the shingles off. You're like, well, shit, it's not really their fault. It's not really your fault. It's nobody's fault. Mother Nature's just a fickle bitch sometimes. And so I don't want to like say that this blend sucked. It was great. It was probably about 7 to 9 feet tall, and it was awesome getting in and out of there all October, November. But when that really hard wind, that 80-mile-an-hour wind came, it just destroyed it. But we've been screening our plots for about 5 years. And then 3 years ago, 3 management seasons ago, I guess, if you want to call it, we call that the spring, we started getting heavily into management, and we actually started feathering the edges of all of our food plots, basically making some less desirable trees fall to the ground and create like a log jam of trees, basically a wall, a fence, just made naturally out of, what Mother Nature's given us with trees, timber, bushes, stuff like that. And so one of the valuable things that we've done is we've created a couple of blinds that we use only for shotgun and muzzleloader hunting. And we sourced all the materials ourselves and Facebook Marketplace, the crap out of stuff, got some really nice like aluminum doors and double pane sliding windows on sale from like Lowe's, and people who were remodeling houses that were like, I had an extra window here, you want it? And so for about $1,000 a piece, we created a couple of blinds that we built completely from scratch. And those allow us to sit, and they're completely, they're dead quiet. They're insulated. They're painted black on the inside. There's carpeting on the floor, and they're extremely quiet. They hold our scent really well. We can get away with a lot more marginal winds that we could have not gotten in a soft-sided blind or an open blind, I would call them. So that's one thing. Feathering the edges kind of push deer. Like, for example, our late season bean plot, it's 4 acres. So that's a big ass field, from corner to corner, the longest point, it's about 220 yards, 230 yards from the farthest points on the edge. And so, when you're stuck in Illinois and you don't have a forgiving like late muzzleloader season like Iowa, then you're kind of stuck with a bow and an effective range of like 50 yards and in. And so how do you combat that? Well, we laid out all these trees so that there was 3 openings into this food plot, and they have to walk by all 3 of them. And so we choose the desirable wind that deer have to go to get into that plot, and we pick the blind accordingly. One set up for like a northwest wind, one we can get away with like a west, a north, and even like a northeast, and another one is completely enclosed, and we can get away with just about any wind other than like a southwest wind is pretty bad. And another location, we have a stand hung up and a blind hung up, and we can hunt about 270 degrees worth of wind on that as well. So I feel like intelligently, one of the things, and I'll never have as much money or time or resources as they do, but the Drury's one thing that I picked up from them and watching all the monster buck stuff that they've been doing for, the last 2-3 decades is this thing called planting to your position. So Garrett and I built these blinds, and we chose these food plot locations so that 2 of the blinds, we were very safe on our entry and exit, and we could get in and out of the blind without blowing the field, or at least not blowing the entire field on purpose every night. So our blinds aren't positioned to the middle of our food, but they're positioned on the edge so that on certain winds, we can get in and out of there, and they're on the edge and they're screened, and they provide us with a lot of cover. So that's the other way. I guess we have stands all over those edge feather holes. So when deer are coming up and down in a parade, that we're safe for certain winds. More times than not, we set our late season stands up for northwest prevailing winds. If you look at a wind chart in the past wind history, it's about 70% of the time that we're getting a northwest wind or some combination of north and west during, the months of October, November, and December. So that's how we usually set up for that, and try to make it so that the most minimal amount of deer are winding us, seeing us, and freaking out and running away when we're exiting. So it was kind of daunting the first time because to make these feathers, we're chopping down a lot of trees, but most of the trees we're bringing down and we're hinging. So it brings a lot of food there as well. And it's been a really good practice for us, and it really funnels deer right past like I said, those cameras that we hang. So that's how we really keep tabs on those late season food sources to make sure, okay, there's the deer we want to kill. He's coming in this hole. He's done it this day, this day, this day, and this day. And now we're going to go try to take a stab at him and kill him.
Yeah.
So
I think another thing to point out would be when you do have these late season food plots, you know, maybe you have a stand set up in mind that you hunt in the rut there or something. You got to think about what your cover is going to be like in December and January when you're going to be in these spots. So blind's a great option, but if you are in a tree, that tree is going to look a lot different now than it did in October or November when you're hunting that. So that's something to think about when you're out there and you're going to plant, you know, kind of plant your location. We had this food plot that we planted, and we were actually in a tree maybe 15 yards away, which put us 15 yards and closer to shooting, but the cover just wasn't there for late season. So we moved back and cut our way up into where like a big hedge tree and then a couple small hedge trees had kind of grown into it. And we're pretty much invisible in there. But you're a little bit further away from where the deer are going to be. Yep. But if you plan it accordingly, you know, you want to have as much forage as you can, but you plan it accordingly. But you definitely want to think about, okay, I'm going to be out here. There's going to be no leaves. There's going to be no back cover at all potentially in this tree. And you're more than likely going to have a lot of eyes on that food plot all at the same time, because most of the time the buck you're after isn't the first deer on the food plot. Like that's what happened to us this year. You know what I mean? But most of the time you have 10 does out there and a couple small bucks and this buck over here. And there might be some real close and some far away. And you got a lot of eyes that are going to see that movement. So when that time does come and your buck does come out and you're trying to adjust to get on him, you have to keep that in mind. But a blind's a great option. You can move in a blind. But if a guy doesn't like blind hunting or can't afford a blind, just make sure that you have some kind of cover. And that's something that we have to do. We're going to plan a small kill plot on the urban farm that I killed on. Yep. And there's very small trees with no cover. So we have to figure out, and there's been bucks daylight on that piece that I would kill, like really nice bucks, and I don't have a tag. But if I were to go in there and try to set up on them on that spot, I would get pegged like right away. So we're going to have to figure out how to do something, tie some lines from a tree and kind of we're thinking about making like a triangle and hanging stuff from it and just trying to give us some cover to make something happen up there. Cause it's the right spot, but it's just, if you hunt it, we were in there with homie and he drew on that 160 class and it was gone. Like, come in on a grunt. It was already alerted. It was in November. He had grunted, and when you grunted a deer, it's crazy. They could be a long ways away, but they have got that thing pinpointed where they heard it, and they're looking in that area, and you're just trying to get, like, maybe he'll look away, and then he just got so close. It was either draw or let the deer go. You know what I mean? So he drew, and that deer did the couple bound and stopped right on the edge of cover thing, So in the rut, you can kind of get away with the decoy. That's something we talked about doing next year because there is no cover, having a decoy in there. But late season, I don't think that's a viable option. There's nothing really to distract them. And you have all those wary does out there that have been hunted all year that are just eyeballing you nonstop. So that's definitely a challenge that you need to make a plan. One thing we did this year was hunt a lot of cedar trees, and you're invincible in those things. If you cut your way into a cedar tree, you can do whatever you want up there. It's really cool. So but a lot of shit don't grow good next to cedars. So that's also something to think about. So
there is an interesting product out there. I cannot remember for the life of me what it's called, but it's like if you can envision a bow hanger hook, like a really aggressive threaded screw that you're going to put into a tree. It's kind of like that, but it's got an open, it's like a 2-inch tube with a screw that you can tighten into the opening, and you can put tree branches in them to add additional like cover, like basically a fake limb to a tree wherever you want it to be. And I've seen those. I forget what they're called, but I've seen them at I think they may be called like out on a limb.
Yeah, I'm gonna
the people that make
them. We're gonna do some ratchet strap deal. There's a bunch of trees and they're all about 8 inches. And you see where I shot that buck. It's that low green, I don't know what you call it, rush of olive kind of honeysuckle, and there's just nothing else there, you know, and we know where we need to be. We just have to make a plan to get in there and do it. And I feel like a lot of people wait until summer when they're out there planting these food plots. They're like, oh, I'm good. There's a ton of cover. And then they go out there to hunt it in January and they're like, okay, I'm kind of screwed here. There's nothing in this tree. And it's crazy how the timber looks different from when you first start hunting in October to now. It's like you're hunting 2 different complete woods, even walking into them. You're like, well, deer can see me from a half mile away right now. So
that was one of those lessons of hard knocks Garrett and I had to learn. You know, we used to be guilty of like hanging stands like right on the edge of the field, regardless of back cover or anything like that. And so now we typically try to cheat between 5 and 10 yards into the timber on a tree that's like a secondary tree. So that way, at least if the deer's coming down a field edge, presumably like when we're hunting them on a scrape line or something like that, that it's not catching us at if it's peripheral vision as it's coming down the field edge, just because it's such a hard edge and we're at least tucked back a little bit. And I feel like that helps for late season quite a bit too, because the limbs of the trees that are in front of you on that edge are going to be breaking up your silhouette and everything. But it's hard to kill a deer during late season. Just everything's quiet, everything's cold, everything creaks, everything moans. Deer are wary. They're in large groups, and they've been shot at for 3 to 5 months.
Yeah.
So
one last thing I wanted to mention before we close this up, I had written down is if you put the food plot in, you do the work, you get a buck out there, you need to shoot with all your late season gear on, what you plan on hunting. And right now would be a great time to do that. You don't want to do that when it's 75 or 80 out and you have all that gear on. Because when you draw a bow back with all that stuff on, you're shooting completely different than you're shooting when you're normally hunting. It feels different. I don't know about you, but I feel kind of giant in the stand. And I feel like I'm always leaning forward because I have so much, like I can almost lean forward and all the stuff supports me. You know what I mean? So I feel like when I'm shooting, you got a lot more thickness on your arm. Your release is going to fit different. You need to figure out what you're going to do with gloves or no gloves. And that's something that you need to plan before, I got a buck daylight and like, here we go, and it doesn't seem bad, but when we've been hunting here recently, when the reel feels like -2, you're like, oh, I won't be that bad. And then you put the clothes on, you need to set in -2. And you're like, I couldn't draw a bow right now if I had to, so definitely something that needs to be thought about. And right now is the right time to do it. It's cold out, put all your stuff on, go out there, shoot, see how your bow acts. Okay, this makes a little bit of noise when it's cold. Maybe you can tweak that. Anything that's hard plastic in winter is a lot different than in November. So definitely some stuff that you need to figure out now if you do plan on hunting here late season or next year. Do you have anything else before we close this out that you think would be worth mentioning?
My best advice would be you don't have to, when it comes to food plots and late season food, I mean, it's not just going to benefit, it's not just going to benefit you, it's going to benefit your deer. You're going to find more antlers. More than likely, the deer are going to deposit their antlers within 400 yards of that food plot. So if you're hunting a, chunk of acreage where you've got a lot of deer bedding on you, you're more than likely going to find your target buck sheds. That's a big benefit. The way I see it too is like when clover and things start to green back up in March and woody browse comes back and it's soft for deer. I feel like if you bridge the gap and have, those food plots planted and they do last the deer through the month of February in particular is just really hard on deer. I feel like you can recruit other deer that are like, man, this farm's great. In fact, Garrett and I have recruited 2 bucks that, we don't know by name that are going to be really nice next year. I saw one the other night that was a really nice deer this year. And you can recruit deer. You can get them through that February time period. And I feel like that time period when turkey season is happening, and that's heavy on our minds, is when a lot of those deer kind of their antlers are budding out and they're trying to get a footing of maybe where they're going to spend, the next several months. When Garrett and I talk to our buddy Chase Burns, who does a lot of like wildlife consultation, he'll say, a small buck, he may not be the dominant buck on a farm, but he's going to earmark that location like, oh man, this turnip spot is awesome. There seems to be no hunting pressure here. This is great. I live, down in a less desirable neighborhood right now, but when I'm old, I want to live in this neighborhood. And so he'll, you may recruit that buck subliminally, like in years to come in the future. And then as it comes to shooting your bow, especially if you're an Illinois guy and you don't have like that late gun season to really get you off of the food, and you have to be in the thick of things and killing deer at 50 yards and in, which is hard when it's cold and windy and all those other things, and deer are wary, that, over the summer, shooting my bow about 5-6 days a week, if not every day. And then during the season, Garrett and I call it bow shape. And, I know that everybody in here, like that's listening right now, if October 1st comes and my target buck steps out at 50, I'm going to cut an arrow loose at him, more than likely, because that's the best bow shape I'll be in all year. Yeah. And the most ready I'll be to shoot. And then as the year goes on, what happens when you are hunting? Well, you're hunting in the morning and in the evening. And if you're doing it on a working man schedule, then you're not practicing. And when you're hunting, you're not like shooting your broadheads into the ground every time. So on days like in the evenings after a day of work, if I can slip out, I'm not actually loosing an arrow that day. So you got to make sure that during the season, I typically try to shoot my bow 2 to 3 days a week continually. Even now that it's really cold, it sucks. But I'll throw my stocking cap on, my big winter jacket on, my gloves, and I'll go out and I'll shoot at 40 and 50 yards, even if it's not a whole many bunches of groups, maybe if it's 2 groups of 5, as long as I keep that muscle memory going. Yeah. Just because you don't want to be that guy that's, hunts all October, hunts November, kills a buck, and in a 2-buck state like Illinois, you're like, all right, I'm waiting until late season. And then you don't shoot your bow for like a month or a month and a half. Now all of a sudden that 50-yard group could become real sloppy. 20 would still be okay. Most people I know that can pick their bow out of the case and, stick them in a 3-inch circle at 20, even after that elapsed time. But when deer are in late season, they're going to be milling around unless you're sitting on an edge feather or a pinch that they have to go through. And you may not always get that 20-yard shot. So my best, advice would be a stickler for going and shooting your bow a lot. So.
Yeah, you got to be a killer all times of the year, and every point of the year, your shot's probably going to feel a little different, just because the amount of clothes and the conditioning that you have. Like you said, when season's coming up and it's late September, everybody's out shooting their bow. Everybody's jacked up, and then season comes and you really don't shoot your bow a lot, because if you have time, you're hunting or you're pulling trail cams or you're scouting or you're doing something, and all that time that you were at your house shooting your bow is pretty much irrelevant and gone. So that's definitely a great tip. Just be in mind that you do have, even though it is late season, you have to perform like you do the rest of the year and make the shot. And a lot of times on a food plot, the shot is probably going to be a little further than you're set up on a pinch in the rut or something like that. It's definitely going to be a different situation. You might have more time for the shot, but it's probably going to be a further distance shot. But all right, man. Well, I appreciate you coming on tonight and chit chatting with us about this. I wanted to talk about this, and I didn't know really anybody that would be more. What am I trying to say? Give me the word. More
wasting their time during late season chasing after bucks.
More qualified to talk about late season food plots. You guys put in a ton of work, and you have made your property perfect for picking out a deer late season on a food plot. And it's super cool to see what you guys done throughout the years building that property. But it's not too late to start. That's the main thing I want to say about this is make a plan now, whether you're going to go all out and you're going to have a 2-3 acre plot, or you're going to do something small, or you're going to, say, hey, I'm going to ask the farmer, whatever you can do to benefit your year. I feel like a lot of people are done hunting right now. Maybe 5% of the hunters I know are hunting right now. Only like the absolute diehard crazy dudes are out there still hunting. and it's a good time to hunt. It's a fun time to hunt. It's beautiful out there during late season, and it's cool because there's not a lot of other people out there hunting. So it's definitely a time that I think people are like, well, the deer are just gone. It's because you don't have food. If you have food, the deer will be there. It's just part of the game. And we've seen that this year with that Throw Grove plot, like no deer, nothing but coyotes for 3 weeks on that cam. It's not even a doe. We get this snow and cold temps, and then I had 7 bucks on it. Like out of nowhere. They were there. It was bucks that were there, like you said, in the summer and early season, and they ear tagged that food plot and said, we know this is here. When it gets bad, we're coming back. And then the next night we get an opportunity of one of our target bucks from November that we never even seen in the daylight. And he's running into the food plot, broad daylight, like nothing's ever gone, but there's been no pressure there. They've been gone. They're just thinking, holy shit, we got this buffet of food and there's no one out here. We're going to dig in. So
I feel like it's extremely rewarding too. Like if you just love watching deer, there's no better time to watch large quantities of deer than the late season and taking it legitimately in inventory. So the farm that we are really proud of managing, it got hit by EHD, would have been 4 summers ago. And our first year after our late destination food sources, we might have had 6 to 8 deer. 3 years ago, about a dozen. Last year, there was the most deer we saw was 18. And I've seen, upwards of about 40-ish deer on our properties this year.
That's awesome, man.
Between that our early season plot and our destination plot. And just because you have that late season food doesn't necessarily mean you're guaranteed to kill. Over the course of the last, like I said, about 10, 11 days out of the last 2 weeks, I've been out there and seen the target buck one time at about 150 yards. Unfortunately, not a whole lot you can do with the bow in your hand at that distance, but I've seen him. I've seen 2 other deer that Garrett and I don't really know of that we recruited that I'm assuming are probably 3 years old. One's really nice. I probably would have shot him. I was in there and told Garrett the other night, I'm like, man, that deer's really nice. I would love to shoot that deer. And all the other deer that we've got on trail camera, like every single distinguishable different buck, we've been seeing almost with regularity, like every single night that I've been out. And it's incredibly rewarding to see the fruits of your labor pay off in that way, and to see like all those bucks, to know that you're going to find the majority of their sheds, to know that for the majority of their daylight day, they're spending it on your property, walking around on you. It's highly rewarding. So if you getting wet feet,
and that if you have that food, they're not going nowhere. So that they made it through the gun seasons, the neighbors aren't going to kill them. And that's half the battle, is no one else killing them. So that you're feeding that deer. He's going to have a better chance of surviving the winter because he has this food. He's going to have a better chance of surviving because he's not going to leave your property to go somewhere else to get food because he has the food. So it's a win-win all the way around. It's just the initial cost of doing the food plot. And it comes down to this, like you said, what's it worth to you to have the deer there and kind of know what's going on. And if you're like us and you absolutely love this, it's pretty valuable to have deer in January because you're like, all right, this deer made it. He's on my food plot. Or even after season, you have a food plot, you still running a camera on it. You're like, okay, I have this deer. I can make a plan to hunt this deer next year. I know he's alive. If you have enough food, you're kind of waiting for summer or October to come where he's going to hit a scrape and you're like, oh shit, he's back. And now you're making a plan. Right now you can kind of make a plan and that's kind of what we're doing right now. Like, okay, we're going to have this deer. He's still alive. What was his tendencies last year? Where do we think he was living? What can we do to up our odds? Because we know he made it, instead of wasting our time, kind of like what we did with Magnum. You make a giant plan to kill this deer, and then you find out a month before season he's dead. It definitely changes your outlook on the season. But I think we'll end it here.
And money too. Save that money. If you save $100 a month, every month, all year, I mean, you can have a very nice food plot for $1,000, $1,200. You can have an extremely nice food plot. Split it the cost with a buddy. Get the guy, couple $100, the cost of the fuel, the cost of the new, hydraulic fluid and stuff for his tractor to do the work. I mean, it's going to be very well worth it for
And a lot of landowners, they kind of take pride in like their land and their deer. And a lot, like every one of them that I've ever planted a plot on, they kind of think it's cool that you're like helping the deer out. You're like, hey, I'm planting this food plot. You know, they like seeing the deer. They like to know what's on their property. They think it's cool that they're there. And you're saying, hey, I'm going to help this. I'm going to plant this food plot and help the deer, but I'm also going to hunt them. But, you know, are you cool with it? And most every time they're like, yeah, go ahead and plant. You know, especially if it's ground that really is not used for anything anyways. So I think that's pretty cool. Every time we've done it, they've been like, yeah, go ahead, you know, and we got to decide what we're going to do with our new lease. I feel like if we could get some food in there, we could really have something magical, but it's just what we're going to do with it. It's kind of a disaster right now, but we're going to wrap this up, guys. We appreciate you listening. We love you. Always try to do the right thing, and Whitetail Legacy is out.